Let's fade Master Kuti. Fela Kuti, rest in peace. Fela Kuti passed away on Black August 2nd, 1997, as a result of long, violent campaign of repression against Fela, who was a fighter for the people, a revolutionary, and a very, very great threat to the systems and institutions of neocolonialism in Africa and global white domination in general. So, of course, I had to play Fela. Fela Fridays. I had to play Fela in honor of his struggle and sacrifice. And, you know, it was widely reported that he died of complications of AIDS and HIV, but that was never confirmed. So, I'm not going to go with that until I have some more evidence. But one thing we do know is that he suffered great government repression, violent government repression by the Islamicist neo-colonial state in Nigeria, and you know, greatly missed, lost way too soon. And his music was also greatly repressed. That's another thing. If you read Del Jones' Culture Bandits Volume 1, and in Culture Bandits Volume 1 is where I first heard of Fela Kuti, in reading Del Jones, and he talked about how many revolutionary artists were, their music, their voice was repressed, and how often they would go on tours or be contracted for tours, and they would be kicked off those tours. Bob Marley, Fela Kuti, and they would sometimes travel with some of the biggest names in the music industry, and those names were apolitical. People who just want to make people shake their booty and dance. And the record industry, the concert tour industry, the corporate media industry wanted black people to shake our booties, but they did not want us engaged in critical thought or revolutionary incitement. So I'm glad that, and I also regret, I mean, I know the Fela Broadway musical was out there, and Jay-Z and Beyonce were big factors in getting that out there. So, you know, it's a bittersweet thing that Fela has reemerged, and that Fela's music and Fela's mission is being better, is at least being introduced to a new generation. But sometimes the means by which that comes through are problematic for me personally. But again, we're of course going to hear some more of my favorite Fela tracks. The first track I played was Water Get No Get Enemy. Water Get No Get Enemy. I played a snippet. No, actually I played Beast of No Nation, and then I came in on Water No Get Enemy, and inshallah we'll hear the rest of that and some more Fela tracks. Also, as we lost on August 2nd, the late great Fela Kuti, we also gained James Baldwin, who was born on Black August the 2nd, 1924. And it's funny to me every time I think about James Baldwin, because I had known about James Baldwin years and years and years before I read James Baldwin. And I didn't want to read James Baldwin because he was gay. And I had learned about reading just about the Harlem Renaissance. And I heard about some of the gay people that were around in the Harlem Renaissance and civil rights movement, James Baldwin and Langston Hughes. And Langston Hughes was inescapable. But I had shunned James Baldwin because he was gay, and I was homophobic, and I didn't want to hear nothing from no gay man, because then it could maybe make me gay, reading James Baldwin. And wow. And like also Baynard Rustin, who was a integrationist, no doubt, but a brilliant strategist. So for a long time, I'm telling you, I was out here Umaring before Umar was out here Umaring. But I continued, thankfully. I did not remain stagnant in my analysis, and as I evolved, I knew better than to not open up access. And as I worked through those issues of my Judeo-Christian and somewhat Islamic indoctrination, I had a sister who was a young lesbian, and she was reading James Baldwin, and I considered her a friend. And actually, I was interested in more than just being her friend, but then I found out she was a lesbian, so we just ended up being friends. And she was reading James Baldwin, and I said, you know, you just reading that because you gay, he gay, and that's all. Y'all just all stick together, like white folks say about black folks. Y'all all stick together. It ain't got nothing to do. But you know, she was a university student. I was in school as well. And anyway, she was like, well, you know, more for me. If you don't want no James Baldwin, it's more for me. And I'm like, well, it's just propaganda. Anyway, long story short, she had given, and this is also, the sister had given me my first copy. I had a copy of George Jackson's Blood in My Eye, but I hadn't yet read Soledad Brother. So she had given me my first copy of Soledad Brother, and it was such a good read. I was like, okay, give me the James Baldwin. And I had never, ever read such magnificent writing as coming from James Baldwin. Such brilliant insights. So I'm glad that I got over my hangups and was able to actually read James Baldwin. And I have to report that reading James Baldwin, I did not turn gay, which I was totally surprised, because I'm like, James Baldwin's writing is so brilliant, I'm willing to succumb to the gay agenda and risk becoming turned gay by reading the writings of a brilliant gay man, and even having a great level of admiration for the level of heart that this gay man had. But it didn't work. I didn't turn gay, at least not yet. But I eat a lot of soy too. I'm a vegan, and I'm a big fan of tofu. So, you know, who knows? Who knows? I'll keep y'all posted on whether or not the gay agenda actually ever captures me, since I'm no longer an enemy of the gay agenda. I stopped fighting it. I have surrendered to the gay agenda, but, you know, it's not working. You know, I still feel all the way hetero. So, you know, but like I said, I'll keep y'all posted. Anyway, so I do have one of my favorite public talks. I guess I'm indulging myself because this is a day of a lot that has a lot of significance for me. So I am a great fan of Fela Kuti, and I have much respect for James Baldwin and these men on the day of transition and the day of entry into this mortal coil. It's Black August, y'all. It's just too much history. And so I've always been a follower of Black August. And way back in the early 90s, when they started having the Black August concert in New York City, when I was living there in the early and mid 90s, I would always try to get tickets. But, you know, when the first Black August concerts came, and they'd always have the progressive revolutionary artists, like The Coup performed at Black August, Dead Prez would perform at Black August, The Roots would perform at Black August, and I always supported the Malcolm X grassroots movement and the whole Black August celebration throughout. But then one year, this is when I walked away from Black August, is one year they had booked Jay-Z to play back Black August. And I think maybe it was 96, 97. I don't remember the exact year. But they had booked Jay-Z to play back August, and I went up to the place to actually protest. I tried to get some people to protest with me, and I went and did literally a one-man protest. And when I got there, one thing about that, I saw J. Rue the Damager. I'm sure he doesn't remember, but I will always remember this. J. Rue the Damager was there out front. He wasn't on the ticket, he wasn't performing, but he was attending the Black August concert, and he was kicking it to some sister, so I didn't want to be too much of a groupie and get in between him and trying to holler at the sister. But I'm very thankful that I had an opportunity to meet J. Rue the Damager. But I was there for more important things. I was there to do my one-man protest against the Jay-Z performing at the Black August, because Jay-Z, I felt, and I didn't feel, I'm going to speak definitively, Jay-Z was an anathema to Black August. Black August is about George Jackson, James Baldwin, Marcus Garvey, Fela Kuti. Black August is the month that we recognize resistance. I love Black August more than I love Black History Month, because Black History Month is not about Black history. Black History Month is Black Integrationist Month. So y'all can have your Dr. Kings and all these other people, but Black History Month is greatly inadequate. So since August, coincidentally, is a month where the birthdays or the transitions and significant acts of many, many grand Black freedom fighters converges. And it has no official recognition. The government don't recognize it. Multinational corporations don't recognize it. So it's still in our hands. It's still directed for, by, and of the people. So anyway, let me tell you my stupid story about a stupid thing, about me trying to, do something stupid to resist stupidity. At this era, I don't know if you guys are Jay-Z fans, or if y'all follow Jay-Z's evolution. When Jay-Z first started, he was a conscious artist. He had social commentary in his hip hop, because Jay-Z emerged in the late 80s, early 90s, where social commentary was almost mandated in hip hop. Even if you go back and listen to old NWA albums before they went absolutely rapping about rape, murder, and total degeneracy, they would always try to inject some level of social commentary in their rap. And DJ Quick and all these other rappers, this was the era that hip hop was an art of social commentary and an art of Black upliftment by mandate. In fact, if you read the Source magazine, which is one of the oldest hip hop publications in the country, if it's still coming out, I don't know. I stopped reading that because it turned to feces everything. Del Jones said, once your oppressor gets into your culture, it's all Mickey Mouse. They contaminate and dilute and eventually redirect your culture. But anyway, one of the articles I read was a hot single by A Tribe Called Quest called I Left My Wallet in El Segundo. And there was a very, very hostile article written about A Tribe Called Quest and saying, in a time of social upheaval, in a time of Black enrage and a Black uprising, why would you waste time and release a single of a vacuous song about nothing? You got to say something. Nothing from nothing brings nothing. You got to do something. So, this was a time where even the so-called gangster rappers, go back and listen to Ron Pays that came out in 88 or 87. Ice-T, the gangster rapper, and the, serial TV actor. Cops hate kids, kids hate cops, cops kill kids with warning shots. What is crime and what is not? What is justice? I think I forgot. So anyway, Jay-Z being, like he said, the hustler, the grinder, the capitalist, the pimp that he claimed to be, big pimping, saw that this was going on. So there was an era he started off conscious when he was with Jazzo, but after he took everything he wanted and cast Jazz aside, even took his name. The original, go look this up. It's on the internet, thankfully. Anyway, he started off, he has some social commentary. You look at some of the first videos where Jay-Z appeared back on MTV, he'd have African dancers and African backdrops. And he'd be talking about the injustices. But he abandoned that. He got with Biggie. Remember, Biggie said y'all was grimy in the early 90s. We were grimy in the early 90s because they considered anything that wasn't high-end fashion, Versace, Fendi, Gucci, Louis. Back then, if you weren't wearing Gucci, Louis, you was grimy. If you were wearing, the hottest jeans back in my day, the Jabot jeans, and some Asics and a hoodie, you would consider grimy, even if you had proper hygiene, which I did. I would be considered one of them grimy hip-hop backpack kids. I was a backpack hip, But anyway, we were grimy in the early 90s. And so Jay-Z was with us, and Jay-Z went over to Biggie's side, wearing Versace and Gucci and baguettes and driving, drop-top BMs. I'm the man, girlfriend. So he went to that. But then there was a resurgence when Dead President and there was a resurgence of conscious hip-hop. And Jay-Z even did a song with Dead Prez. And he changed his name. He was calling himself Jay-Z and then Jehovah. Then he would call himself Jay Guevara. And he would come on stage with red, black, and green wristbands. And he would come on stage with Che Guevara t-shirts. And he had, he was political. That was his new branding style. Because that was hot in the street. And you know what a pimp do? A pimp, stands for nothing except extraction of resources. So they'll adjust. Freddie Fox said a pimp will sell his ass if his hoe won't. A pimp stands for nothing. So, of course, I can just take off the Versace and put on a Che Guevara t-shirt and call myself Jay Guevara and start pretending like I'm a revolutionary. And so back then he went and got headlined at the Black August concert. But I saw through the foe, and it wasn't just Jay-Z. Nas did the same thing. I remember I used to produce. We had this thing called Guerrilla Media, and we would go to the scholars. Shout out to National Black United Front. Shout out to Professor William Mackey. We would go to these scholars, Mansong Kalalibi. We would go and get these old VHS and cassette tapes and digitize them and put them on CDs and DVDs. Because in the early mid-90s, CDs, DVDs was the hot technology. And we would repackage them and distribute. And there used to be this place called House of Nubian in Manhattan. And I would make all these red, black, and green revolutionary artifacts, buttons, and CDs and tapes, and I'd take them to House of Nubian. And he'd buy them from me wholesale and sell them back to the people. But eventually he copied everything and would just reproduce it himself. I guess that's capitalism. Whatever. It wasn't no big deal. My mission was to get the information out to the people. So, even though he usurped me, as long as he maintained the content and the quality, I didn't even care about being usurped. I wasn't very business-minded at that time. I'm not business-minded now, so I can't talk about Diallo in the past when I'm still the Diallo from the past, just a little grayer, a little wiser, but still same OG. Anyway, I'd be in there making my drop-offs. And this is no lie. I'm not making this up. I'd be in there making my drop-off, and I'm not sure what the title, the publicists or the PR or the designers, whatever these A-list rappers have, the people who determine what they wear and their branding and stuff. They'd be in there talking to the owner of Nubian Heritage, and I believe Nubian Heritage, the store shut down, but the website is still there, but you can go there. Contact the dude and ask him. And people for Nas and Jay-Z and other A-list rappers, they would come in there, they're handlers, they're gophers, I don't know, they're interns, and say, okay, Jay-Z is about to go on a European tour, or Nas has a show in a few hours, and I need some ethnic black radical stuff. And they didn't have any idea what they were. And so they get and you go back and you look at Pimpin' All Over the World with Ludacris, and Ludacris has on a Marcus Garvey t-shirt. I promise you he got that from Nubian, House of Nubian. And so you look at the artists, they were wearing Marcus Garvey, George Jackson, Che Guevara, red, black, and green. They started wearing onks, and some of them got diamond-encrusted onks. And you go back and look when they started appropriating the black nationalist and African, Afrocentric style. And their people would come in there and they would have to ask the brother who owned House of Nubian, what is this? Okay, the red, black, and green. What's the difference between red, black, and green and red, gold, and green? And what is this lion? Well, that is the Lion of Judah. Who's that guy? Well, that's Haile Selassie. He's a Rastafarian. What's Rastafarianism? They knew nothing about nothing. They only knew that the imaging, they say, that looks good. So can he wear a Lion of Judah? Is that anti-Semitic? And he's like, no, it's not anti-Semitic. The Rastas use that as a symbol. Oh, I don't care about too much detail. It's not anti-Semitic. It's pro-black African. Give me that. And what's this? Is this? Oh, this is the Ethiopian flag. Oh, why the Ethiopian flag? What's significant? Oh, I don't care. Give me the Ethiopian flag. Give me the buttons. Who's this guy? That's Ho Chi Minh. He's not black, no, but he's significant. He was a guerrilla. Okay, give me the Ho Chi Minh button. Give me the red, black, and green wristband. Give me the Malcolm X t-shirt. And give me the X cap. And they would literally, and I'd stand there waiting for my wholesale slip, and I'd stand there watching that. And then he'd leave and she'd like, yeah, she works for Nas. That dude, he worked for Jay-Z. I BS you not. So anyway, I saw this happening. I try to keep my distance. I always consider myself, I'm a revolutionary, not an activist. So I see something happening. I don't like to get off my square or deviate from the path of subverting the status quo. That's my main thing, not bickering with these little trendy trends. But Black August was something I always supported. Black August, I felt like I said, it wasn't corporate. It wasn't acknowledged by the government. It was something that us underground cats, us grassroots cats had made our own. And then the Malcolm X grass movement built it up and had a wonderful concert series. You know, we'd be literally in people's basements celebrating Black August. And I'm not literally a basement. Professor William Mackey, you know, he would open up his basement to local revolutionaries, local activists for a place to organize, because we didn't have anywhere to gather or organize for radicalism. You know, we didn't want to go to the damn churches. We weren't welcome in corporate spaces, and we didn't have rent to set up our own spaces. And often our living rooms, we were all poor, so we had these little apartments. We couldn't all come together there. So Professor Mackey would provide us spaces for organizing, revolutionary organizing, and enlightenment and mutual support, and, you know, black revolutionary atheistic secular church or what have you. So anyway, the Malcolm X grassroots movement brought it to Irving Plaza, a major concert venue. And I'm cool with that, because they always had progressive artists. But then when I saw they put Jay-Z, that was my last time. I went there when Jay-Z was performing, and I'm yelling at the people, you know, don't go in there, don't buy no tickets. If you got a ticket, rip it up. Let them know Jay-Z cannot come and pimp our car. He can big pimp all over the world, but he can't black pimp. He can't pimp Black August. Don't let this happen, y'all. But they were already playing the hell. He was on that song, Hell Yeah, They Never Came Out Here. It's one of the most pointless verses. Go listen to the Jay-Z Dead Prez verse, where that song, Hell Yeah, with Jay-Z on it. I never came out here. I'm like, what is he even talking about? We together on the same track. What you gonna call us now? Basically trying to say there's no distinction between gangster rap, pimping hoes, smacking hoes, slanging drugs, shooting hard not to kill niggas, and there's no difference between that and revolutionary music, uplifting the people, chanting down Babylon. He essentially said there's no difference. He said, we together on the same track. What you gonna call us now? I'm gonna call you an opportunistic parasite, and I'm gonna call a Dead Prez sellout. I mean, God, you know, gotta have standards. So anyway, that was my last time going. I went back to the underground of Black August. I've always celebrated, I've always embraced, I've always loved, I've always advocated for Black August. But that was the moment where I'm like, nothing can be preserved. You got to keep everything underground. So, anyway, it's Black August, y'all. This is not when you learn about Black history, simply about Black history. This is not to honor our ancestors. This is when you reinvigorate yourself for Black resistance, Black rebellion, Black revolution, Black opposition is what Black August is about. And if any of these clowns try to tell you anything, it's about the Panthers. Yes, it's about the Panthers, because Panthers offered armed resistance to oppression. This is about militant resistance. And not just armed resistance, scholarly, intellectual, principled resistance to capitalism, to global white domination, to all forms of oppression and discrimination and dehumanization. And I'm going to go ahead and throw in ecocide. So that's what Black August is about. And don't let nobody play with you on that. And I got some issues I want to talk about, because I do want to share some more of Fela's music. I do want to share this speech on James Baldwin's birthday and Fela's transition day. We got a lot to cover and we don't have much time. I also want to speak on Brazil. The African diaspora needs to formalize. We need the African diaspora to become an organized body where we coordinate our efforts. All African people outside of the continent of Africa need to form political, economic, and military agendas and coordination and cooperation. When you're voting in U.S. election, if you are a black man or woman who is a citizen of the United States, you should not be voting in the interest of America. You should be voting in the interest of the African diaspora and the African continent. You should pay attention to Haiti, to Jamaica, to Nova Scotia and the African Baptists of Nova Scotia. The African diaspora needs to be an organized body. I say this all the time. For as long as our oppression is globalized, as long as empires are globalized, as long as capitalism is globalized, our resistance must be globalized. You cannot formulate effective local resistance to globalized oppression. The Haitians demonstrated that to us. The Bolivians demonstrated that to us. Ghana, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, South Africa, all these spaces, the United States of America from Harlem to Oakland, has demonstrated that black people cannot get local freedom. We cannot get community liberation. We can't even get national power without a global network, without global cooperation. So pay attention, y'all. Right now, the largest population of Africans outside of the continent of Africa, Brazil, Africans are under direct threat. I said this when the Olympics went to Brazil and they were slaughtering African children in the street like vermin. Y'all mad about Trump talking about infestation? The Brazilian government was mass slaughtering, and it ain't just Brazil. It's Colombia, the African people in Guyana. Latin America is extremely racist, and it's more Africans in Latin America, Central America, South America, whatever you want to call it. It's more of them there than here. And we have common cause. We have common ancestry. Dr. John Henry Clark said the only difference between an Afro-Latino, a Caribbean Negro, and a Black American, the only difference is a boat stop. They would pick us up all from the same nation, from the same region, from the same community. And they would offload those ships go look up the routes of the Triangle Trade Route. Y'all got blood in the Caribbean. Y'all got blood in Central and South America. Y'all got blood in Brazil. They would buy whole lots. They bring whole lots. They have a plantation here, and a plantation owner falls on hard times. And he take a whole lot of Africans and take them to port and sell them all. And they've been in Virginia, Louisiana for 2 generations. He take them to port and they land in Panama, or they land in Brazil. And he didn't take families. And they go from picking cotton in Louisiana to mining gold in Brazil. Your blood, your cousins. We are all African, and the disgusting, despicable African descendant of slaves, ADOS movement, ignores that history. And guess what? When we were in chains, they never asked us for passports. They never ask us if we want to go. So it is the height of absurdity. It is a pathological denial of history, as Bobby Wright would say, for us not to acknowledge that we are Brazilians and Brazilians are us. We are Jamaicans and we are Trinidadians. We are Black Panamanians. We are Afro. There are over 1 million Africans in Mexico. Go read the research of Dr. Claude Anderson. He said Africans were not stupid. He said if an African would make a calculated decision, I'm getting the hell off this plantation. And I'm in Mississippi, southern Mississippi. I'm down in Louisiana. Why the hell would I run through all this hostile territory? Why would I cross 4, 5, 6 slave states to get to Canada when I could just hop, skip, and jump to Mexico? Those Afro-Mexicans are runaway Africans from the United States. They are ADOS. dumbasses. Same thing with black Hondurans. Those are African people. We are everywhere. Now, us dispersal, Africans being dispersed across the world, can be an asset or a liability. We've allowed it to become a liability. We need to transform that and make it into an asset. And we can only do that when we understand how our interests align. At 20, cotton picking 19, and I gotta explain this. When Africans worked this out in 1919, Marcus Garvey was literally writing about this 100 years ago. And we ain't figured it out now. And he was able to teach and get sharecroppers, illiterate sharecroppers, to understand this. And we got Negro PhDs, Negroes with history degrees and journalism, and Negroes that's been all over the world with passports full of stamps that don't understand this basic point that a sharecropper that never traveled more than 5 miles outside of where he was born understands Pan-Africanism better than we do today. We had settled arguments and settled disputes and settled issues 100 years ago. And now we digging them and resurrecting this utter mental nonsense. It's utterly frustrating for me, but the struggle continues, I suppose. To say all of that, Africans are in direct immediate danger in Brazil. Pay attention to Brazil. If the African community in Brazil collapse, there is no hope for the African diaspora. We have to build them up. And I said, African people, we should have boycotted the damn Brazilian Olympics. If we had took a stand with what happened in Brazil during the Brazilian Olympics, this wouldn't be going. Bolsonaro wouldn't be president right now. Bolsonaro is just like Trump, an overt, bloodthirsty rapist. He is destroying the survivability of all humanity. As I'm speaking, before I go off the air, more than 100 football fields worth of rainforest will be cut down, never to be regrown in our lifetime. And he's cutting it down for mining. He's cutting it down to grow soybeans to feed cows, so y'all can get y'all meat on, when you should be a damn vegan anyway. So anyway, Bolsonaro was exposed for corruption, just like Trump. Trump stole that election. George W. Bush stole his election. Ronnie Reagan stole the election. Like I said, since Dwight D. Eisenhower, there hasn't been a Republican who was fairly elected to office. Since Dwight D. Eisenhower was the last damn Republican to actually win a majority, win the justly, defiably into the office without any type of cheating or underhanded tricks. Ever since Dwight D. Eisenhower on down the line, every single Republican elected to office stole that seat because nobody agrees with the Republicans. The Republicans rule from the minority. That's why the United States hasn't been a democracy. It was never a democracy because by the time they allowed black people and women to vote, they were already keen at manipulating the vote. You have to understand the founding fathers in the United States feared two things. Number one, they feared the European monarchs. Number two, they feared the peasants. They called it the tyranny of the majority, the tyranny of democracy. And the tyranny of democracy is all the people, the masses of the people actually have control. They didn't want a democracy. They wanted a republic. They wanted an oligarchical republic. But that's not our topic today. Let me get back to Brazil. There's an overt racist in power who is destroying the ecosystem, who is destroying the capacity for the millions of African people who live in Brazil to sustain themselves. They have major prison riots all over Brazil right now. And just like the United States, African people are overrepresented. They are wantonly murdering Africans in the street because Bolsonaro wants to turn Brazil into Colombia. Colombia and Argentina. Argentina is such a white racist nation that many of the Nazis during the fall of the Third Reich during World War II, and Brazil and Argentina were two places that the Nazis said, if we can get out of here and make it to Brazil or make it to Argentina, we will be safe because those are racist nations. that agree with the philosophy of the Nazis, and they remained neutral during World War II. And many Nazis that weren't brought here to the United States under Operation Paperclip ended up. Go look at the movie called Boys of Brazil. So Africans have been living in that, and I know a lot of y'all love to run around America talking about black and brown power, black and brown unity, black and brown solidarity. And before I ever spew out the word brown, after I say the word black, the first thing I got to ask you, where are you from? Colombia, Brazil, even Cuba, Dominican Republic? I have to ask you, what's your position on the racism back in your home country? What opposition did you offer to the racist status quo in your own damn country? Don't come here and say black and brown if you was running around in your own country acting white. Because a lot of people, they are only geographically brown. Because when they cross that southern border, they become brown. But before they got here, they were white. And they behaved every bit as white people, up into including oppression, discrimination, and even the lynching of African people. So this clown Bolsonaro stole the election in Brazil just like Trump did. And I know y'all like to be slick because y'all anti-democratic. You can get a black person think they all of a sudden become revolutionaries because they don't support the Democratic Party. Saying you don't support the Democrat does not make you a radical, does not make you revolutionary. It just makes you a reactionary crybaby. That is not political enough. The Democrats ain't no difference to the Republicans. Democrats do. Shut up. And engage in some real political analysis, political strategy. I'm so sick of that. Y'all think y'all so slick when y'all don't support Hillary. Yeah, I didn't support Hillary, but that ain't what makes you radical. That doesn't make you politically astute. Doing this base level kindergarten stuff. But anyway, there was this guy, this progressive named Lula da Silva, who actually took a stand and acknowledged Brazil's racist history. He was illegally put in jail. He was framed for a crime he didn't commit, put in jail, which opened up for this fascist militarist Bolsonaro to get elected. And you even have Glenn Greenwald, if y'all, especially you anti-Hillary folks. I'm an anti-Hillary folks, but I was hating on Hillary long before the rest of y'all. I hated Hillary back when y'all loved Hillary in 91, 92. When y'all were voting for, when the majority of black folks were voting for the Clintons and loving on the Clintons. So my Hillary hate is not trending, it's not trendy Hillary hate. It's deep-seated, long Hillary hate. But I digress. Glenn Greenwald was one of the people who, a magnificent journalist. He's even threatening to put Glenn Greenwald in jail. He wanted to kick Glenn Greenwald out of the country. But Glenn Greenwald, he's married to a Brazilian citizen. And so since his husband is a Brazilian citizen, according to the Brazilian Constitution, they can't just kick him out of the country. Now, he's even more progressive on immigration than Trump is, even though he's a murderous fascist. So anyway, this Bolsonaro guy stole the election, but now he's been exposed to be a fraudulent journalist. A fraudulent president. And when you expose these people, what you think he's going to say? Well, I'm going to step down. No. So now that it is proven that he's been exposed to be fraudulent, he doesn't have to pretend anymore. It's actually liberating. When Trump gets exposed for his lies, Trump feels liberated. He's like, I don't have to pretend anymore. I used to have to, I'm the least racist person in America. Like, here's evidence that you're racist. Okay, yeah, I'm not. So you caught me. They don't say I give up when you catch them. When white racists get caught doing dirt, they don't give up. They're like, okay, now I don't have to pretend anymore. Now what? And what? But I guess white racists ain't the only people that did it. Nation of Islam said the same thing about Malcolm X. They were like, yeah, okay, if we did kill him, what you gonna do about it? We need solidarity. African people are under attack in Brazil. And what's most unfortunate about that attack, even though it's happening in Brazil, even though it's Brazilian, European conquistadors, Spaniards doing it, they are financed and they are armed by the United States Empire. So our tax dollars is going to kill our people south of the border. Articulate your solidarity, inform yourself about the struggle, and reach out to our brothers and sisters and see how we can aid them in their opposition to the Bolsonaro regime. And you Brazilian brothers and sisters, ask us how we doing under Trump and what assistance and legitimacy you can offer our efforts here. Iron sharpens iron. And speaking on around the world, right now we got an old school tribal war, and this goes back to yesterday's show, Hot This Year. Black liberation versus climate change. There's a wonderful book that every African who's trying to organize for the future, every African that wants to advance, who wants to understand what we have to do, is written by Christian Parenti, and it's called Tropic of Chaos. And Tropic of Chaos is a really good book. The book was so good is that when Christian Parenti came here to the Chicago, and he gave a lecture at a free open lecture at the University of Chicago. I came, my wife came, of course, Dr. Mingo, she's a nerd, but anyway. But I brought some other brothers and sisters there. Don and some other brothers and sisters. I brought as many people as I could because this climate change, this global warming, this climate disruption thing is going to hit black people harder than any other population, except maybe Southeast Asia, India. But it's going to hit us hard. But even if it hits India harder, they're better equipped and more prepared. We're not preparing for this. We still trying to get on the front of the bus and sit at the lunch counter. We fighting 100-year-old battles. We haven't even mobilized ourselves. We still fighting police brutality from 100 years ago. We still ain't brought justice to Emmett Till. The woman who lied on him is still alive, so we way behind on this. We need to catch up and accelerate and intensify. But anyway, it talks about most of these conflicts where they're running around telling us, oh, these are ethnic conflicts. These are tribal conflicts. These are religious conflicts. No, they're all ecological conflicts. And one of the major conflicts on the continent of Africa that is a direct result of global warming is in Mali. Right now, you have the Dogon attacking the Fulani people, and the Fulani people slaughtering the Dogon. And the Fulani and the Dogon are two people that are very special to the African diaspora. I used to be told all the time, oh, you look like a Fulani. Are you Fulani? Yeah, I'm Fulani by way of Missouri, if you want to call it that. And all African people from that area, Mauritania, Senegal, because my name is Diallo, pronounced Jallo on the African continent, and I have an African name from that region, whenever, when Africans migrate to the United States, any little semblance they get, because nobody wants to leave their freaking home. People leave because of imperialism and their desperation. People they don't want to come to America because it's the greatest nation in the world. They come to the United States because that's where their resources are. People follow their resources. If I came to your house right now and took everything of value from your house and brought it to my house, and then I lock my door when I bring it in, and you come knock on the door and say, can I come in and get some food? And I'm like, oh, why do you want to come to my house? My house is the greatest house on the block. No, I'm the thief that stole people's stuff, and then I force people to come to have to get it from. And I want to lock them up and criminalize them for following their own resources. And it's like I said, if you white people don't like having Mexicans in your country, stop exporting your junk subsidized commodity to Mexico and stop importing Mexico's resources, including crude oil. And I guarantee you, you won't ever have to see a Mexican again if you left Mexico's wealth in Mexico and stop propping up oligarchs to rape Mexico's resources and sell them below market rates to American corporations. So if white people, let me promise you this, if you end your imperialism, you won't have to see another black or brown person. Even I guarantee you, many of the black people here, born and raised here, will go back to Africa if you ended imperialism. If you're a white racist and you don't want, and there are some white racists that understand this. Pat Buchanan said we should be a republic, not an empire. Pat Buchanan is a racist who opposed imperialism because he knows imperialism is one of the main causes of migration. And I guarantee you, if white people, if y'all stop stealing people's stuff and you go back to the caves and hills of Europe and those other countries where you come from and you keep making your blood pudding and eat your kidney pie and play your lame ass music, nobody will follow you. Nobody will come around you. I promise you. But I digress. In Mali, the Dogon and the Fulani are slaughtering each other. The Dogon people are agriculturalists. They set up settlements. They are stable non-moving people. The Fulani are herdsmen. They travel. They're nomadic. They are Islamicists, and they live like Bedouins. They set up encampments, they graze their cattle, and then they pack up their encampment and they move to the next area to graze. And so throughout history, nomadic people would come into contact with stable agricultural people, and they would have festivals. They would have trade. They would intermarry people so they don't have a shallow gene pool. So some herdsmen would marry into the agricultural community and become stabilized. And some people, young men mostly, wanted to be adventurous. They'd marry into the nomadic community and start moving around and seeing the world. It was a system that literally worked for tens of thousands of years. No capitalism, no currency, no hyper exploitation of resources, no destruction of ecosystems. But now, because of global warming, the Fulani is having trouble growing their crops and sustaining their food, and even the nation of Mali is importing tons of rice and grains and things they used to grow for themselves. And over 80% of people that live in Mali work in agriculture. And most of those people work in self-sustained agriculture. They grow food to feed themselves, not to sell on an open market. So when you bring hungry cattle, because they have to move, it used to be you could bring your cattle into a place and settle in for a while and allow them to feed. And while they're feeding, they're churning the soil, and their feces is fertilizing the soil. And then you move them to the next area, allow that area to regenerate. But the area is not regenerating because of global warming, because of intense heat, because of erratic weather patterns. And so they have to encroach on the lands, and these people start slaughtering each other. And then the media tells us it's not because Western corporations and Western nations are emitting carbon and destroying ecosystems. Oh, they're fighting because they're different tribes. The Dogon tend to be Christian and are what they call animists or traditional Africans, and the Fulani are now all Muslims. And that's why they're hacking each other with machetes. This is another global warming issue. That's why I tell you, black people, eat a vegan diet, fight against carbon emission, reduce your own carbon emission, and get with this green movement. Educate yourself about sustainable practices. Because it won't be long that we're going to be cutting each other up, not over gold chains and foreign whips. We're going to be hacking each other up over enough food to feed our children. Because these insane capitalists cannot stop destroying the planet for short-term profit. And it's already happening to our brothers and sisters in Brazil, the brothers and sisters in Mali, and throughout the African continent. Just remember, when you hear about it, if it ever reaches the media, the Mali and Dogon, and many people, all them Africans, they always killing each other. Africans, that's all they do is fight. That's not true. But that's the only time they get attention. The only time any media pays any attention to Africa is when there's conflict or when there's an Ebola outbreak. Africa doesn't exist if they're not able to report on suffering and misery. But be mindful. Even the disease outbreaks and the epidemics is related to climate change. That's why here, we in the West, we in the first world, have to do everything in our power because we have the highest carbon footprint and we are closer to the machine than our brothers and sisters in the third world. We can throw a monkey wrench into the machine much easier than they can. Remember that. I wanted to talk about the Democratic debate, but I don't want to throw up all over this microphone. And I'm on YouTube Live. I'm also on Instagram, middle finger to Facebook. Stop suspending my account for hate speech. Nothing I say is hateful. Nothing I say is not backed up by evidence, whether it's history, research, or whatever else. When I say things, you can go to the CDC or government website or whatever. What I say is confirmed. It's not hate. But I guess hate is in the eye of the beholder. So, unless y'all want me spitting and throwing up, talk about that lame-ass Democratic debate. It wasn't really lame. I just, maybe next week, y'all, we can break down the Democratic debate and Joe Biden's punk ass and Obama's punk ass. But I digress. And I don't have time, y'all. I have to play some more Fela. I got to play some James Baldwin. I got some ancestors to get. But let's talk about George Jackson. I call this Unbroken. Today's show is Unbroken, remembering George Jackson. And that's all I can say and be the end of it. Remember George Jackson. I These are my books. I wish when I brought books, and I'm gonna put them on the air. I wish that I should get some nice books. My books are stained, and the pages are frayed. I don't have it because I read them. Like these books, I brought into the studio with me my 2 books on George Jackson. But there's also I have a audio called Prisons on Fire, which is an audio documentary that is a lot of the recordings of George Jackson. George Jackson came into political consciousness in prison, so there was very limited access that we had to George Jackson. I'm pretty sure when they cleaned out his cell, we lost volumes and volumes and volumes of very, very astute political analysis. Blood in My Eye by George Jackson is a political manifesto. And this is the greatest political manifesto that I've ever read. I read the Communist Manifesto. And what the Communist Manifesto did for Central and Eastern Europe, this book, Blood in My Eye, which I will call the Jacksonian or Georgian Manifesto, is one of the greatest strategic books on black armed rebellion and black resistance that I've ever read. This gives you more insight into the evolution. To me, the only other book that better demonstrates the evolution from a reactionary to a revolutionary, from a lumpen proletariat to a full-fledged revolutionary, is the Autobiography of Malcolm X. After the Autobiography of Malcolm X, in terms of being able to watch the evolution, the emergence of a magnificent revolutionary mind, I got 3 books that I would give to that. The number 1 book is the Autobiography of Malcolm X. I would like to say Soledad Brother was number 2, but I can't. I have to give that to Asada. In fact, that was the first book I ever gave to my wife. She wasn't my wife then. She was just a girl I was trying to holler at, for the weekend. And here I am stuck. 20 years. It'll be 20 years next year. But anyway, the first book I ever gave my, the girl I was trying to holler at, but who became my wife, who trapped me, Dr. Mingo, the first book I ever shared with her was Asada. And so after Asada and the Autobiography of Malcolm X, in terms of biographical evolution of a revolutionary, Soledad Brother is where it's at. And I'm not reading, and I'm not really focusing on Soledad Brother here, but actually when I was looking for Blood in My Eye on my bookshelves and in my little stacks of books around the house, I couldn't find Soledad Brother. And I'm like, where's Soledad Brother? Because my wife, who is a scholar, she takes books off the shelf and she goes off to these conferences in these different places, or she brings in the books to educate her students. And one day I'll just come in the house and I'll look, and in her bag will be my copy. She sometimes has her own copies, but it'll be my copy of Wretched of the Earth or something. And I'm like, what are you doing with that book? Oh, I took it to class. I needed it for this lesson. And that makes me nervous. And I've given away more books. I have many books, but I've given away more books than I currently own because I wasn't always a scholar. I just used to read books. And so to books like me, you don't collect books, you collect comics. I got a lot of comics. I held on to my comics as best I could. But if I read a book and I thought it was a great book, I'd give it to a friend. I thought that was my philosophy. You got to pass knowledge around. I don't want to be a revolutionary by myself. That's stupid. So if I read a book and I thought the book had good content, I'd give it away. And if I read a book and I didn't think it had much value, I'd keep it just because I didn't want to throw it away, but I didn't pass it. So there are so many books, and I know, Tiger, I need my copy of War of the Flea back. I can't find that book anywhere. War of the Flea. Tiger, I'm putting you on blast. Give me my damn copy of that book back. Give me my book back, nigga. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I had to see that happen. But anyway, eventually I learned. Keep your books, because you're going to want to come back to the books. And now that I'm older, I don't remember stuff in my head so much. I have to write it down and annotate it and highlight it. I used to read a book and I knew everything. I could tell you what page and stuff, but my brain is aging. And my wife wanted to talk about, well, you're going to have to use cannabis to preserve our brain. I ain't using no cannabis. I am a pure body. I will not desecrate my temple with these wicked drugs. But my wife and I, she's researching and talking about, she wanted me to drink some cannabis tea or some mess. Nope, I am pure. I am drug-free. Like Nancy Reagan said, just say no. But anyway, Professor Mackey said I had a mind like a steel trap. And it's one of the greatest compliments I was ever paid. One of them. I've gotten some other compliments, but I'll never forget that. But that steel trap is a little rusty. Anyway, let's talk about George Jackson. Who was George Jackson? He's a black man just trying to make a way, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, living in the West Coast. And he got locked up for 1 year to life because he was a delinquent. And the judges used to pass out these sentences, these arbitrary sentences, and they say 1 year to life. Yeah, and that is like basically an indeterminate sentence. And it basically saying when you demonstrate to the authorities that you are bowed down and you're willing to submit to the authorities, we'll let you out. You can get out in a year, you can get out in 5 years, you can get out in 60 years. And of course, you know, George Jackson never got out because George Jackson went into prison like Malcolm X, antisocial, criminal, but he did have he was a malcontent. He was what he described himself as a warrior, meaning that he had justified rage and resentment, but there was no political analysis. And in the first thing he talks about in this wonderful book, Blood in My Eye, he talks about these other people that he saw himself in. So a letter to a comrade, he states, they think they don't need ideology, strategy, or tactics. They think being a warrior is quite enough. And yet, without discipline or direction, they'll end up washing cars or unclaimed bodies in the city-state's morgue. But I was almost certain that wouldn't be your destination, brother. So what he was saying is, basically, the other brothers in the streets and the brothers locked up, they saying, I'm a man, I'm willing to fight. I'll fight these other prisoners. I'm willing to fight these pigs. I'm not with all that talking. And all the righteous rage, all the ability to aim and shoot guns, he's what led me to the conclusion that ideology is all. Ideology is the foundation of everything else. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how skilled you are at weapons, how righteous or wicked you are. I need to know what your fundamental ideology is. How do you define and explain yourself? How do you define and understand and relate to the world? What and who are you? And how does what and who you are fit into the world? The world as it is or the world as you seek to create? What is your ideology? Because I always meet a lot of people who are enthusiastic, who are ready to, I want to do something, I want to make some change. But if you don't have basic ideology, everything else you do will be an absolute waste of your time. And saying, I want people to be good, I want happy, positive energy, none of those things are ideologies. Food, clothing, shelter, I want people to have what they need. That is not an ideology. I'm sorry, I wish it was. I wish these noble things that y'all are into were adequate. But when you're dealing with systematic scientific oppression, you need systematic scientific revolution. Or you won't sustain, because feelings are transient. Do you know how many times throughout my life, in one day, about black revolution and black liberation, I can feel enthusiastic and pessimistic. I can be motivated and totally depressed. I can go through all that. But my core ideology is what sustains me, not my feelings about black people or the black struggle or our potential to win or our potential to lose. All that comes and goes. George Jackson understood that implicitly, deeply, intimately, he understood that. And so even as he was forming the Black Guerrilla family, even though he was trying to form a black armed militant movement, and he was appointed Sergeant at Arms for the Black Panther Party, even as he would be in his prison cell doing 1,500 push-ups, 2,000 sit-ups, when he would train, he talks about how he trained in the martial arts, and he would sit in that small iron cell and prepare himself to physically deconstruct another man, to take another man's life in the most efficient way possible. And you look at some of the pictures on there, and it's always those guys scare me. I never seen a gangster who acted tough. Growing up where I did and the time I did, I met a lot of gangsters. I never saw a gangster that acted hard or acted tough. You could just look at them. They were just, when KRS-One said real bad boys move in silence, he knew some things. Gangsters are low-key people. They generally have really good sense of humor. I'm exiting Instagram. I'll see y'all later, y'all. They're low-key people that have good sense of humor, but they can turn on you. But I'm just saying, as much as George Jackson literally was transforming himself into a revolutionary killing machine, George Jackson was intensely studying ideology and philosophy. He was studying finance. He was even reading Jean-Paul Sartre, Marx, and Lenin. He was reading Wilmot Blyden. He was reading African scholars and European revolutionaries. His mind was as powerful and as deadly as his body. And I think that's something we've lost. Because it's really easy to see the warriors. It's really easy to see the Panthers marching down the street with shotguns. But nobody wants to watch somebody. There aren't enough pictures of their libraries. We don't see photographs. We see Malcolm X standing behind a podium with his finger up. We see Malcolm X peeking out a window with his pistol. We see Huey Newton standing on top of a car at a rally, charging up the people. We even see Fred and the people confronting the pigs, staring down death and not flinching, which is wonderful, which is necessary, which is admirable. But we don't have enough imagery of these men's libraries. We don't have enough access to their personal notes, to their pamphlets. We want to act like our revolution is an action movie. Revolution is an intellectual endeavor. I've never met a non-scholarly, non-academic revolutionary. And whether they are fighting in a university somewhere or they're behind the trenches. I have to run this down all the time. Bobby Seale was an engineering student. Huey P. Newton was a law student. Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, was a medical student. Che Guevara was a doctor. And for the ones that didn't have formal education, like Marcus Garvey or George Jackson, they were Malcolm X. They were self-educated. Malcolm X had perfect vision all his life. He ruined his eyesight reading and studying. And for today, in 2019, where we have the internet, where we have libraries, I remember my aunt who is alive today. I just went to see her. My great aunt, my grandmother's baby sister. She said she would have to sneak into the library. And there was this one old racist white lady that would let her come into the segregated library. Because black people weren't allowed in the libraries when she was coming up in Missouri in the 50s. And they would take the old library books and put them in a cart or in a wagon in the back. And black kids could come and rummage through that for books. And it would rain on those books and they'd get mildewed and warped. And the books were already tattered. And some of the white kids that knew that the black kids were going to get the castaway books would spit in them and smear nasty things in them. But my aunt, the first person in my family to go on and get a doctorate degree, she said there was one old racist white lady that took pity on her, thought she was a cute little pickaninny. So she'd let her come inside the library. And she'd hide my aunt under her desk and give her some new crispy books to read. And she'd have to sit in this dark, dim light under this white woman's desk and read some of the new nice crispy books in Missouri. And then one day she came in there to climb under this white woman's desk, and the white woman said, "Hey, I'm retiring. So don't you bring your little nigger butt around here anymore now. You're going to get in trouble because I won't be here anymore. So go on, carry on." But it was too late because my aunt had developed a love of reading. She instilled it in me and passed it out to generations. But she also maintained her resentment and hatred of oppression too. So she works hard to empower people and give people the resources they need to live dignified lives. So it's hard for me in a time coming from a people who went through that to get educated. And that's a kind story. If you read about Frederick Douglass, it used to be trying to read a book or learning how to write your own name meant 50 lashes, meant castration, meant being strung up in the stocks, butt naked in the hot southern sun on a plantation. When we go through all that to get educated, now for people to stand around and come to black revolutionary meetings, I ain't with all this talking. You all into them books. Find me a revolutionary who wasn't into them books. Find me a real revolutionary who wasn't all into them books, who wasn't all into discourse, debate, and talking, and sussing out the ideas, and engaged in critical thinking and critical analysis, and communicating those ideas, and distilling these concepts and complex social conditions, and this long strand of human history, and breaking it down so the masses of people can consume it. Find me a revolutionary who didn't do that. So if you say I'm not with all that talk, you are not a revolutionary. If you ain't with all that theory, then you're not a revolutionary. Revolution is a theory. It is a conspiracy. And George Jackson, one of the men who died, one of the men who stood up and shed his blood and did not go down passively. He was not just assassinated. He was murdered. He was in open combat to the system. And he was not just fighting in America. He was fighting in what Neely Fuller called greater confinement. Because every black person is in confinement in America. So if you're a black person in jail, you are under the heaviest compounding oppression there is in the world today. So George Jackson said that ideology, strategy, academics were important. It's not enough to be a warrior. It's not enough to hate your oppressor. It's not enough to have a strong desire for freedom. George Jackson also talked a lot about repression. He said in this book, revolution is illegal. He says, I'll quote him, power responds to all threats. Response is repression. If the threat is a small one, the fascist tactic is to laugh it off, ignore it, isolate it, with its defense mechanism, the media. The greater the threat, the greater the corresponding violence from power. The only effective challenge to power is one that is broad enough to make isolation impossible and intensive enough to cause repression to the effect of normal lifestyle to as many people as possible. Meaning that your oppression has to be your resistance has to be so broad that there is no neutral position. The system you have to become such a threat to the system where there are no neutral people. Everyone has to acknowledge, every black person in the black, I ain't into that stuff. I'm getting mine, secure in the bag, yo. They have to acknowledge, like Obama did, I am with the oppressor or I am with the people. Because the repression is the resistance is so broad that the oppressor cannot identify who's with them and who's not. That's how the Afghans. In Afghanistan, there are no neutral parties. The white people cannot find any Uncle Toms or sellouts. And that's why a country with literally a 16th century infrastructure, no highways, no advanced communication, no satellites, not even an updated rail system. A majority of 70% of its population is illiterate. All they got is rusty Kalashnikovs. Their weapons date back to pre-World War I. And they beat America in a war. Why? Because there are no sellouts. Whatever you think about the Mujahideen, whatever you think about the what do they call them? The Taliban. Whether you like them or love them, they kicked America's ass. Right now, today, we have over 20 U.S. soldiers committing suicide every day in the United States because of the psychological tactics employed by the illiterate Afghanis. Because their repression, they followed George Jackson. And if you don't think these people read George Jackson, if you don't think the people in Vietnam, freedom fighters and throughout Latin America don't read George Jackson, Marcus Garvey, and our other people, you are a fool. They are students of African philosophy. People take our stuff and put it to better use than we do. That you can't be neutral. Whenever we rise up, we as a black resistance, you got to respect everybody. No, you don't. You don't have to, and nor should you. Well, everybody got to say. No, everybody don't have a say. Revolution, and that's it. No integration, no compromise, no submission, no retreat, no surrender. Do you want to get free or not? It should be freedom or death, not freedom or integration, freedom or secure the bag. It has to innovate. And when it is too broad, nobody is unaffected. And no more going to fight. And what has happened in black liberation struggles is the black people will go out into the street and fight. Sometimes 1%, 2%, 3%, 5% on a good day will go out in the street and fight for something. And then when we win concessions from the oppressor, the 99 to 95% of the people who didn't do a damn thing be the first people in line for the rewards. There are people in Chicago right now, rich niggas, black ministers, black politicians, black businessmen who are able to generate wealth and join in with the white people to exploit the labors of the masses. And they wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Fred Hampton. And they don't kick nothing back to the struggle. They don't kick nothing back to the community. When the black people rose up under the leadership of Black Panther Party, under Chairman Fred Hampton, under George L. Jackson, the Europeans, the white power structure said, yo, we can't keep with this overt repression. We got to make some concessions or they'll bring this whole thing down. They're in Africa. We got Black Panthers in Africa. We got Black Panther parties in the Caribbean. We got Black Panther parties in the Black Brixton in Europe. We gotta quell this. We gotta pacify this. So they said, we're gonna make some secession. We're gonna take down them colored only signs. We're gonna start actually prosecuting people who lynch. We're gonna go to the banks and to the mortgage companies and tell them you gotta stop, saying nigger, no niggers allowed. And when they made those concessions, we're going to bring some black people on. They didn't bring on the militants. They didn't bring on the freedom fighters. They brought on the passive Negroes who didn't join in the fight, but got all the rewards from the fight. That's what happens when you don't follow these basic rules of the manifesto that is blood in my eye. This is a black revolutionary manifesto, y'all. And if a white man wrote it, it would be seen as such. It would be taught in universities around the world, like Marx. If there was an old crusty white man that wrote this book, it would be everywhere. This is a more keen, more up-to-date, and more thorough manifesto than the Communist Manifesto. This is the Black Revolutionary. This is a Socialist Manifesto. This is a rebellious, a guerrilla warfare manifesto. This is a basic ideology for Africans around the world manifesto. So, we have to stop allowing for these punk, chump, suckers, and scallywops, as Dale Jones would say, to have escape routes. We got to stop letting punk, suckers, and chumps stand up and collect benefits that we fight for. If you didn't join in the suffering, don't join in the celebration. If you didn't join in the struggle, don't line up for the concessions and for the rewards. Black revolutionaries, stop saying you're fighting for all black people. You're not fighting for all black people. You're not fighting for Michelle and Barack Obama. You're not fighting for Jay-Z and Beyonce. Y'all shouldn't be fighting for that Leela girl and her husband and all that tabloid mess. You are fighting for the oppressed masses and the conscious revolutionary vanguard. That's it. Anybody that can't be identified as the masses of the people or the revolutionary vanguard, get the hell out of our way. We need class consciousness. He also said, when you are fighting against an oppressive system, if you are not prepared for the retaliation of that repressive system, then you are either naive or you have a death wish. When you rise up against the system, you prepare for the system to rise back up against you. But that's all I can get into because I got some other stuff to share. I just wanted to give a brief introduction. I could do the whole month on just George Jackson. There is such dense content in this little bitty book. There are so many insights. Brilliant African man. One of the wisest thing they ever did, our oppressors ever did, was incarcerate and eventually murder this brother, because this brother would have been, even Huey P. Newton has said in the rumors of the time, Huey P. Newton was afraid of George Jackson. Even though he would say, yeah, free brother George, when they would deny him his parole, he would be like, good, because if George was out here, things would be different. And I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if the people are ready for George. We still not ready for George. More than half a century after his death. Q4 Radio, AM 1680, iTunes, TuneIn app, Q4.org, QUE, the number 4.org. We out here. Support the show if you can. You can become a subscriber to YouTube. You can share the Q4 Radio link. You can share DialloKenyatta.com. You can share the content with your friends, allies, enemies, lovers, and haters. Help get the word out. I appreciate all my listeners, but I know the vast majority of my listeners will be passive listeners. They will just consume the content. But you who take ownership of the content, promote and share the content, this has to get out. Not to spread my word, but we need people like George Jackson, James Baldwin, Fela Kuti. We need to radicalize, revolutionize our people in our community. And one of the means of doing that is getting revolutionary, progressive, independent, non-corporate, non-sponsored media. This is for, by, and of the people. And I implore you, I compel you, I ask you. As I say, I don't feel that I have fans or followers. I have co-conspirators. I am not a savior. I'm not someone who's trying to free anybody. I'm trying to ally with us so we can free ourselves. So please do your part. Share the info. And I'm going to share some more Fela. I got to share a little Yellow Fever, and then we'll get some, as much as we can, of this wonderful James Baldwin. Happy birthday to James Baldwin. Rest in peace. We lost in 97. Rest in peace to Fela Kuti. And forever. And like I said, one thing, the statement when he said, George Jackson said, they will never count me among the broken men. They never broke him. And he is a living example for all black men and women, and really any man or woman that seeks to be an asset, to make a just attribution make a positive attribution to the just aspiration of the people. George Jackson, we will never account him among the broken men. Q4 Radio,